innovation for quick implementation of the law, help in the community participation, facilitate the community participation, and also build institutions for sustainability. Because as was rightly mentioned, this is not a one-off that, once you make houses and then you're done. It's a continuous process of managing our ever-growing urban centers. And the government of Orissa, I must compliment them. I take every forum the opportunity to compliment the government of Orissa for their farsightedness, was that they were willing to move beyond land rights to a livable habitat, to actually slum-free cities and preventing proliferation of future slums in cities. Yeah, so very quickly, this was the scale where the project was involved. Some pictures. This was the journey that we undertook. So there were land rights certificates, even something called a land entitlement certificates were given. And this was what was done, drones and household surveys, community participation in planning for the neighborhoods, identification of available lands, formation of the Slum Dwellers Association, community spaces, setting up the Jaga mission, which was, and one thing that we did, and I would like to elaborate on it, was we realized that the urban local bodies, especially in the smaller medium towns, had very low capacity. And that was, and if we wanted a planning process to be implemented and the law to be implemented in its letter and spirit, we needed professionals on the ground. And we set up something called a fellowship, a Jaga fellowship, and it was a fellowship that lasted for 1.5 years. Happy to say that the Orissa government has now taken on most of the fellows as part of the Jaga mission, who now work with the urban local bodies. This was also another fact that we found was data was missing. So when we did the household and the GIS survey, we wanted that it should be available and it should be updated. So this was a land information system that was set up. The scale of the project. So very quickly, what can we do in PMAY 2.0? And my recommendations based on what we've done in Orissa and elsewhere is tenure definitely tops the list, especially for small, medium towns, for towns that are urbanizing, coming into the urban network. Yes, tenure security in whatever form it can be, especially for BLC, and having the revenue department as an important stakeholder, because this documentation sometimes proves very, very challenging, especially for informal settlements. So looking at tenure and what can tenure provide, it helps in access to formal credit, improve livelihoods, and demand for an ownership of community infrastructure. The other thing, of course, is we are focusing not just on a house, but also on a habitat of ensuring transport, related community infrastructure, and setting up the community governance structures for that. So this in brief is what I would like to say on the BLC. And moving on to the next component, and this derives from the work that we've been doing in migration, the work that has been done with internal migrants. And most of us saw in the aftermath of the lockdown, I think the sheer numbers took us by surprise when we saw people, walking back, the exodus of people from the cities, and that, kind of brought home to people who were not aware of how much of our cities and urban centers actually depend on migrants for the survival. So just to put this in perspective, because rightly said before me was different types of migrants, different type of urban poor, and also different typology of housing and housing requirements. Large part of our urban centers, especially the bigger ones, have seasonal migrants, people who are not, who do not have the city as a permanent home, who are staying there maybe for 6 months, 7 months. And Professor Sridhar before me talked about a mobile home. And that's something that we've also seen, especially for construction sector, on construction sites, which employs a large number of migrants. My submission to that would be, of course, that if we have mobile homes, we should ensure that we have standards for them, because sometimes they are like, virtual heat ovens, because they get these containers which are just then made into mobile homes. So for every typology of housing requirement that they're putting forward, we should ensure that standards are set in place and enforced. So so as we see, there are about 100 million short-term migrants in the country, people who are currently living in very, very precarious conditions. Their housing is in their workspaces or in slums, or a large part of them constituting the homeless that we see in the cities. So about 17 million homeless totally in the country, and the urban population contributing a big part of the country living on rent. I'm just referring to Surat because we did a project in Surat under NULM. And Surat, as you can see, has 58% of its population comprising migrants. So the highest population of residents to migrants, I think, ratio in the country. And when we worked in Surat with NULM shelter, our work was basically, we realized that there were shelters, there were these kind of housing, if you may say, transit housing available, but their condition was very bad. So the management of these centers becomes an issue. And how we could get SOPs in place for management selection. So that was our role. And interesting data that we got from these shelters, or they were shelter for homeless, almost all of them were migrants. About 50% or more of the shelter were casual labor, what were people who were coming in for short duration. And these were people who would come back to Surat year on year. Just some recommendations again for rental housing. Like I said before, a different typology of residents coming into the city. A large part of the residents of any cities has different categories of migrants. All of us at some level are migrants, but then there are the short-term migrants, there are the seasonal migrants, different typology of housing. And my submission would be that while the ARHCs are a good beginning, the numbers currently proposed are small. These are housing stock that have been existing. So the issue of transport should really be addressed, because one requirement for any migrant who comes into the city is proximity to the workplace. And that's why most migrants who are coming in are willing to stay in their workplace despite the bad conditions, inhuman conditions that are there. So firstly, housing that addresses needs of all migrants, transit housing, short stay homes, dormitories for single males, facilities for females, facilities for families coming in. So all kinds of housing to exist. And the private sector would probably not find it feasible to really look at the needs of short-term migrants or seasonal migrants. So necessity for the state to step in for this. These are the points that I want to make now, and I'll end. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think a very good presentation on how collaborative housing can be achieved through an excellent exposition in the Jaga mission. And those who have not seen the Jaga mission work in Orissa from the housing sector, I would propose that they must see that and see how some excellent outcomes can come when the government and the Tata Trust, organizations like Tata Trust, are able to collaborate along with the people, and who make it appear as if an entire body of things are addressed, not only just the housing. I've seen that roads and shelter, electricity, all of it has been addressed, and in a very economical way. And perhaps that is one way of looking at things. I also get a feeling that the panel proposes that we should have something in ownership continuing along with that of the rental. So that is the point I take, and the role of philanthropy being very important as we go along. So if I'm to sum up and open the floor for discussions. Okay, so I think we have Gautam Bhanji with us on line mode. I'm sorry, I was just about to miss him out, and he's an extremely important resource that we have in the country, and we've always utilized his intellectual capacities from time to time. I think we'll take him on board and share his views, for him to share his views. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. My apologies for not being there in person due to some family health emergency that I could not step out of. And it's a pleasure to see everyone. And I won't stand between you and the discussion. Many of the points I want to make have been already made, so I won't repeat them. But I just wanted to actually use again this opportunity. Like Shikha said, it's been a pleasure over the last year, because the ministry has engaged in a really commendable exercise of very active listening. We all have presented to think about what the next generation of housing policy should be. And we have been forthright and we have been challenging, and it's been really wonderful to see the openness on the side of the ministry to really tackle the question. So I'm happy to be here again. I also will follow from the previous speakers and just mark a set of principles for thinking about the next set of both PMAY and the next policies. And I'm coming from two places: from the acknowledged questions of the changing housing situation that Sridharan talked about, and equivalently, the challenge for some of the places where PMAY has not moved the way we would like. Sir mentioned ISSR in particular, and it's something we spent a lot of time to think about. I also want to just remind us that our goalpost has to be always to work back from that larger number of the housing shortage. And the scale of our housing shortage, I think, remains very powerful. And it remains equally about the adequacy of houses people already have, as well as those that require new kinds of homes. So I have only one slide, and I'm just going to lay out, I think, things that will be discussed in detail over the next 2 days. My first proposition is, I still feel that we are not doing enough to focus on the housing that already exists. I want to echo what Shikha was saying about the need to focus on existing slums and land rights, and the Odisha Mission is an excellent example. But I also want to say, I didn't use the word slum on this slide precisely because one context that is also changing is that slums are no longer the only proxy for urban poverty and vulnerability. During COVID, one of the things we realized is that a lot of the housing distress, a lot of the migrants Shikha talked about that were leaving our cities were not leaving from slums. They were actually leaving from a range of different types of housing and very vulnerable neighborhoods that may not be slums. So I think that one proposition I want to give us is that we no longer think that covering all slums covers all the poor. And I think that means that we need to think about different kinds of vulnerable neighborhoods, migrant housing next to industrial areas, peri-urban housing, housing inside urban villages, dilapidation within old historical city areas, and large-scale vulnerability in our smaller towns. The ex-Registrar General of the Indian Census once said that to think about slums in small-town India is statistically nonsensical because the infrastructural deprivation is throughout the town. So I think that I still feel like a model that emphasizes an Odisha style, if you will, consolidation and slum upgradation and titling program is essential for PMAY 2.0. I think we have to balance the need of building new houses with improving and regularizing existing housing. I'll remind us again that regularization for things like unauthorized colonies or peri-urban areas, the housing of the elite, is more common. But the regularization and titling of slums has become less common. It was strong in the 80s in many places. Odisha is the newer one. Punjab, incidentally, has passed the same act as Odisha, though not begun implementation. And I would like to urge any policy framework to keep the focus on upgrading and consolidating existing vulnerable neighborhoods, just as we focus on building new neighborhoods better. I want to echo everyone's point about rental housing, and I want to link it to the first speaker's, Parul's point about saying that a lot of the times when we speak about the beneficiaries of our housing programs, we talk of the poor. But I think it's important to understand that these are all workers. They may be workers in the informal economy, but absolutely centrally, it is important to understand that many of their housing decisions are based on employment. I think this is key. Migrants or residents make housing decisions not on the quality of the house or the pakkaness of the house alone. Almost all of them primarily decide housing by its proximity to work. And I think this is absolutely essential for us. This means that rental housing must actually be central to our housing policy. It must not have a separate process. I also think that it should be understood as worker housing. A lot of our own history in successful housing policy shows directed schemes to housing for different types of workers that recognizes that housing is a function of employment viability. It is not only a function of affordability or affordable rent or the quality of construction. I'll remind all of us in this room that while our construction rates for PMAY are strong, our occupancy rates for those houses remain a challenge. This was also a challenge in JNNURM. It is a challenge in state housing schemes. And this reminds us again that workers will not take formal pakka housing in the periphery of cities if they cannot make their livelihoods function. Therefore, both consolidation and thinking about rental are ways to understand the centrality of location and not just of focusing on the quality or the pakkaness of the house. I want to also suggest, finally, though, that building new homes is essential. And for this, thinking about why ISSR has not taken off the way we thought, to be serious about really rethinking how we intervene into land and housing markets. Now, very often the gap between market approaches and state approaches are seen as a binary. I don't think anyone in this room would think that is true. And therefore, I think it's impossible to think about how land can be leveraged to create markets for affordable housing. But I want to emphasize the word create. Our housing markets are deeply unequal. The barrier to entry is very high. It's very high for middle-class households, the top 10, 15%, let alone actually working poor households. Therefore, markets will not attract workers until we regulate them in a way to do so. I think it's very important to think about, particularly in the non-metropolitan cities, how to use public land banks, how to use affordable housing zones that were part of PMAY that we haven't done, how to think, like Sir was saying, that public developers can also leverage. We've used TDR for so long for private developers as an incentive. We have not used TDR for public landowners as an incentive. And I think this would be something to explore. There are many other examples like this. But we have to regulate our housing markets, both for rent and for land markets, leveraging our public land more aggressively in order to create a sustainable market at the actual bottom 60% of households. Because right now, all our analysis, private or public, academic or consulting, tell us that the housing market is only catering at most to the top 15%. And this is a problem that we have to build head on. The other two things, I only have 5 minutes, so I'll stop quickly, is a different governance. You see, I've changed the color of my green. So the different approach that I think the other thing about the mission is that it must allow, as it goes forward, a far greater state specificity. The urban nature of Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu are completely distinct from each other. And I think it's important that the imagination of what affordable and adequate housing is challenged by be regulated a little more specifically at the state, so that states have the freedom to contextualize a framework policy more than we have been able to do so now. I recognize the public finance challenges of a century-sponsored mission, but I think we have the imagination in this room to imagine that flexibility. And the second is, I think we are not doing enough to differentiate housing policy for metropolitan cities, for metro cities, for non-metro cities, and for the transition, the rural-urban transition, the towns that have just become Nagar Panchayats or municipal councils or notified area committees. One of the noteworthy moments about the Odisha mission was that it started in notified area councils and municipal councils instead of starting in large corporations, where the land markets are easier, where the opportunities to intervene are easier, where the problem is more manageable, where of course, however, capacity and resources are constrained. I think the differentiation in current PMAY models is not enough by simple scale. And I think both state and scale specificity needs to come into our policy design. And my last point is that I think it's absolutely pivotal that we keep saying, how do we get more actors involved? Philanthropy is absolutely one of them. I want to also suggest that employers that used to be a critical part of housing and affordable housing in different models of our development, from industrial townships in Jharkhand to rental housing in Kolkata and Hyderabad and Mumbai that were built by employers, I think it's pivotal to bring employers back into this conversation. If the one thing that COVID has taught us is that work and housing and employers and employment are linked. This goes back to the question of consolidating existing housing. It goes back to the question of rental housing. But I think it's very important that we don't just think of state and market. We think of state, market, and complete the tripartite by bringing both employers and worker organizations back into the dialogue. I think all of these allow us a bolder reimagination that we can act on multiple directions at scale. The housing question is complex, and I think that this multiplicity will allow us the best set of actions together. And once again, I want to thank all of you for the time, and again, appreciate the openness and thinking at the ministry level about the next generation of policies. And I hope that we can all proceed together from here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Gautam. That was very illuminating, and particularly your take on addressing the issue of vacant houses in the government sector elsewhere. Also, the relationship of housing with the employers is very interesting. And I think for Kuldeep's consideration, I thought that this was really good, that we should have a different set of policies for metro, non-metro, and transiting urban local bodies. Perhaps that's a very interesting one. And upgradation of slums and regularization, which Gautam spoke about very strongly. So all in all, I think we have quite a set of prescriptions. I think I'll just go through them once again, and then invite your comments, suggestions for the ministry to take over, and also maybe questions. I think a couple of points that I had noted, now I can discuss them in some detail. I think that the example of the lighthouse projects and also the ARHCs, where technology grant was being given by the ministries, could possibly be one way of looking at housing as we go along, that people, those who make houses with the use of innovative technologies on which the ministry has been emphasizing for a very long time, could be one of the ways of providing government assistance to such builders and private sectors, people coming from the private sector who want to invest into housing as well as get some money out from the government to make it more viable. We could have so if we say from moving from housing for all, we can have technology-based housing, we can have rental-based housing. But when I talk about rent, who do we assist? Whether it should be the assistance given to the banker, like it was being done for CLSS, or should the benefit be given to the builder who is going to make the house, or to the beneficiary on some sort of a mechanism as we have it in Brazil, where rentals and other things are provided. So rental assistance to whom could perhaps be the question that the ministry would like to get into greater detail with the experts, because if this is the way to go, or this is partly the way to go, then perhaps we'll need a mechanism to address the issue of rental accommodation with whom. I think we have some voice regarding the housing based on ownership and tenure-based issues have to be addressed in a big way. So that could continue in some revised format, because housing for all has been able to meet up quite a lot of requirement. I think there is a lot of latent demand in the new emerging sector, or people, as I told, the new migratory people, and also people who are coming of age. So housing on demand could be potentially one other source of this thing, or housing for new demands could be one way of looking at the housing sector. Another issue I wanted to touch was loan-based housing. That if you want to make a house, you can enter into an agreement where the loan would be paid up in smaller parcels of over an extended period of time, and the ministry could fund it, like it is done in the case of ARHC, where the private entrepreneur starts making money from the year 5th or 6th, and probably by the 10th, 12th year or the 14th year, as we had calculated at that point of time, they start turn around, and the money can then be shared, the funds can be shared by the municipal corporation and the builder to that extent. I also feel that there could be something for housing for professionals, because housing for professionals would really embrace a lot of metro city concerns. Therefore, you could have a stratified structure in which you say this is for the corporate and the professionals. This is housing for EWS, which is based on rental model. So we can have a bouquet of approach, because no story in India is ever complete in its like a straight line. There are so many variants depending on our population type, topologies, demands, that one size fits all will probably not work. I think that is a very important point made. I think that the policy on slums needs some correction, because it did not do as well as the BLC did. Perhaps maybe 1 lakh was too little a sum for a city like Patna, or maybe something like Gorakhpur in UP, or maybe some other B grade city, whereas the policy was skewed in favor of a very upward cosmopolitan city where one expected that a lot of monetization would be possible. But I really don't know how much of monetization is possible in B cities in eastern part of India, and perhaps also in certain parts of East and South India. So we could be thinking, there could be a rethink on increasing the contribution by the government there. I also had some discussion with people from Neretco and Kradai yesterday, and they suggested that the taxation structure in housing makes it unaffordable. The affordable housing itself becomes unaffordable because of almost a 35% tax structure levied on it. So maybe certain affordable housing sections could be thought about, where the taxation structure could be so that it becomes more relevant and attractive for the for the private entrepreneur. I still feel that the affordable rental housing complex has a lot of merit in the manner in which it was started. And I think we should look at that in a big way. And lastly, as we heard Madam Srivastav on the Jaga mission approach and how collaborative housing was done, I think housing with CSR or housing with philanthropy could be one model where big organizations like Tata, HCL, Wipro could patch up along with the government of India and do it for segments of population which are not only EWS, are perhaps more needy, because that may have been actually left out in the PMAY segment because there was a scheme which was getting to this shelter for home. But I really feel that when we talked about housing for all, the capacity of the house income to be about 3 lakh also excluded a large number of people from outside the mission. Therefore, it may be worth the while to have a housing with based on philanthropy to address to this need of people, which perhaps needs to be addressed quite urgently, because they are the lot of people who now need to come up higher in the hierarchy. So I think that's all that I have to contribute for the moment. Now I'll open it for the discussions and questions, if any. Thank you. Ma'am, please. Mic घुमा दीजिएगा जरा, please.
I think it was very interesting to hear the deliberations and also the thoughts which were being propounded for PMAY 2.0. I have just two suggestions, and that is more in terms of taking this process further. One, I think it will be good to, since if one is really thinking of looking at different states and different scales, then is it possible to also add in an element of state-based consultations? And I think given the variety of states, at least thinking of a group of states and organizing statewide consultations and looking at scales within them might be one way to actually clinch some of them. The second suggestion that I have is, I think you're right, sir, when you especially talk about the ISSR and the rental housing as really being in some ways two distinctive paths for the future, and which have not received adequate deliberation. Therefore, I'm highlighting them. I think BLCC is also important, but Shikha has already commented on it. But I think these are two dimensions which also require much further work in terms of thinking about these, because I think the objective that the PM illustrated yesterday is very important. We are not looking at houses just for the sake of constructing houses. We are looking at houses as a key to a dignified life. And therefore, what are the outcomes of houses which are created via ISSR is perhaps a question which I don't see being adequately redressed at all. And therefore, I think we do require a separate discussion, a consultation on the same. And similarly for the rental housing component, because there are many questions which are remaining and contained within them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think very relevant, and indeed, state-based consultations across the country would be of great help to the ministry in finally coming out with the policy prescriptions. Anybody else? Yes, madam. We'll take you after this.
Good afternoon, panelists. It was a very interesting session. I'm Alkarani Agarwal, coming from a census town in Gujarat, that is Lavacha. Now, if we have to talk of this PMAY-U, one strong suggestion that I want to give here is that we need to decongest the cities, the statutory towns, and shift our focus of PMAY-U to the census towns, which is the real place of focus, as everybody said, proximity to the workplace. If we see industries that are all surrounding, let's take Vapi. We have all industries in Vapi. Can we really afford to give them an affordable house in Vapi, where we are having houses worth 1.5 CR and 2 CRs? No. But within a proximity of 5 kilometers, where all the census towns are there, we can definitely have these PMAY-2, and this will help us. Point number 2 is we need to look into the banks. We are really digging into, we have given a big presentation to the ministry already, which includes all these points, that we are digging into the pockets of these affordable housing people with the market, the title report, the taxation part. Everything is being duplicated when you're buying a house directly from the builder, which is not really required. Third point is, what we call is which is already given in the guidelines, that we do not need a guarantor when you are giving houses to these people, which are just EWS category, LIG category, but which is also there in our guidelines, PMAY-U guideline. It is mentioned that you do not need a guarantor, but none of the banks are accepting this. And hence, this is a big problem in providing homes in the EWS and LIG category, because these are the informal section of the people. So when we are talking of PMAY-2, if we look into these areas, we can really give homes to these people. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share a small story. Madam had some problem with regard to the census town not being taken up in PMAY, and that things eventually happen in India is the story of Madam Agrawal and her worthy husband, who made at least 12 visits to the ministry and fought at every level, including her issue coming up with the Honorable Prime Minister also. And I'm very happy to say that her problem was solved, and that town is very much a part of PMAY. And so it gives me a lot of hope seeing you actually, that things can really come around. Thank you. Your points are really very valid and well taken. I'm surprised that the guarantor issue is not been addressed, and I think this is something very interesting that we can take up. I'll invite Hitesh Makwana, the Principal Secretary from Tamil Nadu, for his views, because Tamil Nadu has been a forerunner in the issues of housing, and when we talk about housing and urban development, it's truly an inspiration hearing the Tamil Nadu government on this. Thank you.
First of all, I convey my sincere thanks for inviting me for this excellent urban housing conclave. All our panelists, they have given excellent views and excellent ideas. There are certain points which, on the basis of our field experience, I just want to highlight here. We talked much about this land rights. This land rights in Tamil Nadu, we started this system since 1992. We have 1,65,000 houses or beneficiaries to whom we want to give land rights. Even after lapse of 30 years, our number has not reached to more than 32,000, in which government wants to give land rights. Every government orders are there, everything is there. And now recently we have come with a new system of sending draft sale deed to beneficiaries. Okay, this is a draft sale deed. You please come and sign the agreement and get this land rights. But there are so many issues in this, because we think that a person who is living there, so he will live there perpetually. In urban area, it doesn't happen. Moment you have told that you are having land rights, we are not going to evict you, we are not going to do anything to you, and we are providing all the facilities. They have any incentive to get the land rights, unless and until if he wants to sell. If he doesn't want to sell, very few people, they will come forward to take the land rights. So my only point is that this land rights, yes, it is an important thing. All these things are there. But unless and until he wants to sell that property, people are not coming forward. And yes, our mechanism is also so weak. We can't force them. You come and purchase, because we have taken decision that we are not going to evict you. So this is one practical difficulties we are facing. We are talking about this affordable rental housing complexes. In Tamil Nadu, all these schemes were there earlier also. Today, again, we have come up with new affordable rental housing schemes. We have more than 40,000 people to whom we have given this affordable rental housing. We are finding it extremely difficult to collect the rent from them. They are willing to pay for cable TV connection every month, 250 rupees, 300 rupees, but 100 rupees rent, we are finding it very difficult. So when we are talking about these things, simultaneously our grassroots realities are extremely different. State government is willing to give land rights, but there is a central government land. We are having, in most of the metros, we are having railway land, n number of slums are there. We have port trust land also, there is a slum. We have not implemented a single scheme in this area. Reason being, total non-cooperation of central government departments. Now, when we are talking about affordable housing in partnership, central government, I request that let central government department can also be on board. They can partner with the state government in Tamil Nadu, even in Chennai today. If railways and port trust, if they will come forward, definitely we can construct more than 5,000 houses under AHP. But even after lapse of 7 years, we are finding it extremely difficult. So I request the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to take up this issue with the landowning department like railways, port trust, and various PSUs. Even IIT is also having same difficulties. And what Gautam Ban, he mentioned about the proximity to their employment. It's a extremely important point. Under BSUP, today we are having 20% of houses which are unoccupied. We have made allotment, but yes, houses are some 15 kilometers away from Chennai. Some places it is 20 kilometers away. They will take allotment. They will make whatever payment has to be made, but they will not be in position to give it on the rent also to someone, because there is a clause is there. For next 5 years or 10 years, you cannot sell or you cannot give it on rent. So this 20% of houses today totally unoccupied. So the main reason is that they will go back to Chennai, they will take it on rent some house, and then they will keep these houses vacant. So like that, loan. I think this government of India can take very serious view on this. Our CLSS, why it is successful only in Gujarat or 1 or 2 states? Why not in other states? Most of the states, it is CLSS has gone to the MIG section, even not to LIG or EWS. We have taken up with the National Housing Bank, we took up with the SBI also, but even my Honorable Finance Minister, in every state level banking committee meeting, this subject was taken up, but we have not found any positive response from any of the banks. And yes, it's absolutely right. They are asking guarantee. From where they will get guarantee? So this issue has to be taken up more seriously, and they can have a special scheme for urban weaker section people. There is no linkage between AHP and CLSS. So that linkage is very much required. Fortunately, my managing director, he took a lot of efforts and convinced many of the micro financial institutions, and some microfinancial institutions, even Jana, that foundation, their institution has also come forward to provide some loan, but not from any of the scheduled bank or not any nationalized bank. So this is what our field experience. If we see these awards, why Maharashtra is not there? Why Karnataka is not there? Why even Odisha is not there? Why even Rajasthan is not there? Because precisely in metro, as Mr. Ban rightly told, we require different kind of approach. In Chennai, I cannot construct a single BLC house. In Coimbatore, we cannot construct a single beneficiary-led house because land is extremely costly, and government has taken a decision that we cannot give land rights in Chennai or Coimbatore or that kind of corporation area. So there we have to definitely go for the AHP only, and for AHP we require different kind of approach. In Tamil Nadu, we have we are one of the front runner in AHP also, but that moment you go vertical, that cost is increasing phenomenally. We talk about Mumbai and Gujarat, that PPP, and that has been successful because that land value is extremely high. So that can be leveraged with your other commercial activities, but that is not possible everywhere. So why our that is ISSR is not successful in many of the states. That is the main reason. First, government of India is giving only 1 lakh rupees, but parallelly you are not having that much appreciation of this land. So that is has to be kept in view while formulating for the PMAY-2. We are also telling about Tata or Birla or Ambani to have and do something philanthropic for their employees. They are anyhow they are in the organized sector. They are anyhow in the organized sector. We are talking much about the unorganized sector. As we all know that housing is not a public good, but affordable housing is public good. So our main target should be on the affordable housing and not on the housing. Let housing already, as Mr. Sridhar has already told that we will do regulation, we will put some zoning, we will give some higher FSI, and those will be that will take care of the normal housing. But affordable housing at government of India level, also there is a requirement of certain norms, certain guidelines, if we want across the country. Otherwise, some state now in Tamil Nadu, we have come up with shelter fund. We have also come up with IFMC, that is the financial management company also we have established, and they are also coming forward with working women hostel. They are also coming up with the ARHC. All we are why Tamil Nadu is fast mover due to the involvement of this our IFMC, that is our shelter fund 2. We are also coming up with FSI. Certain whatever encroachment eviction has been done for the housing, they our Habitat Development Board will get certain TDR, and that TDR will be used for purchasing premium FSI. So that scheme is also coming up. So at state level, something we are doing it, but government of India level also, if some effective steps are taken, it will be means overall helpful to the state government. We are also talking about decongestion. Now we have to do balance, whether we want transit-oriented development or whether we want decongestion, because one side we want to tell that there should be some means all important corridor in the city. There should be transit-oriented development should be there. We have to congest that area, and simultaneously we are also talking about decongestion. So there is a need of some fine balance between these two, three things. So
Thank
with
you
this,
very
thank
much.
you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hitesh, on this. We have discussed this problem, and we would like more to be done during the day. I think Tulasi wanted to share something that could be the last we take, because we have to break for the next session. We can continue discussing this during the day.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
So I speak from having seen what is happening some places across the world. Industrial bodies, one of the submission made was estates like corporates should come into providing housing for their employees. That's going to be a difficult proposition because they are in business and their business is not housing. What I am looking at is we have industrial clusters and migration is of two types. People who come work and then intend to go back, and people who are going to settle down. Like if you see stories from Kerala, there are people who have gone there with their families. For those families, housing is necessary and they may not live there permanently. So some type of temporary accommodation has to be given. And then there are just these young men who are going to be there, where we should provide the service of a decent living. Sir was speaking about mobile housing, and madam made a valid point that they can be ovens. Yes, that is true. We have seen cases like in Singapore, when we saw the COVID, we saw visuals actually how people are living. That is not what we want to recreate. But across all major industrial towns which are there, we definitely need to come up with housing, rental housing as a service. And my understanding is an income tax exemption for such companies will definitely go a long way. And this is already being provided. We are not going to do anything new. If you see any industrial area, there are developments all across. For 2,000 rupees, a person gets to live. He probably gets an opportunity to bath in a closed place. That's how all our industrial cities are working. We need to make it more comfortable living. And second thing, what I have observed in urban housing is we are building these vertical units. Each unit space is around 300 to 350 square feet. Considering a house of 5 people, the average size in the lower income group, household size is 5 people. It is really difficult to stay. That is one of the reasons why there is so much people take the houses, but immediately after 18 years, another person gets married and there is a continuous demand. And 350 square feet housing is not sufficient for a proper living. The government of India norms in this regard. That is why the government of Telangana came for a 2-bedroom houses. Because they are young children, a married couple, it's not really a good sense of living. We are technically on paper giving them housing, but that's not going to be sustainable in the long run. And another thing, we are not talking about the political economy of slums. The biggest elephant in the room is political economy. This is a bone I have to pick with Gautam since long term. You're talking about regularizing slums. How do we overcome the moral hazard of creating new slums? Because today I regularize it, I am incentivizing them to go ahead and settle at a different place. And that's an administrator's nightmare. So what is our policy position on that? Every slum which is regularized or where there are two aspects to it. There is a moral obligation where I have to give those people a right of tenancy, a security of tenure and all that. But then how do I balance it with the interest of not going ahead and creating a new slum? Because there is a political economy to it. And there are a lot of unoccupied units across the country. Like I can give the example of Mangalore. Anybody who has gone to Mangalore, it has many high-rise apartments with an occupancy rate of 30%. This is the middle income housing I'm talking about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
On this, and very, very illustrative. And regarding the slums, I think we have a session in which Kuldeep says we will discuss on this issue of tenancy factor. One thing that I recall regarding the rental housing, Hitesh, is that when we were framing the ARSC policy in the ministry, this issue had come that how do you realize rent? And therefore, there's a very thin line in the policy where we mentioned that we will give it to more organized sectors like industries or people from whose salary these rentals could be deducted, because I quite foresee this problem that just pushing people into a rental accommodation, the state probably will lose out on the revenue, maybe the builder or somebody will have to take the haircut. So it's best that it is made into a manner where either the bank or the employing agency is able to deduct the rents. But I think the issue of industrial clusters was a very bright one, and the political economy of slums. I'm happy that it is in some other session, because that's not a very easy thing to address, because you have either this or either that. So you have, there is we don't see a midway ground yet, but that is for the brainstorming. And I think we've had a very, very productive session, and I'm sure that when this is circulated for more policy related interventions, as ma'am just suggested, that we somehow will have to dig deep into the issue of rental housing and the ISSR, the takeaways from PMAY as we move into PMAY-2. But right now, the task before all of us is that from 64 lakh houses constructed, how do we reach at 1.2 crore houses done? Because I'm quite sure that we are very keen not to repeat the JNNU-RM story. We have had a very good strike so far, but it is up to the people who are in the mission and all of us to ensure that this becomes the resounding success it already is. Thank you very much. I thank each of the panelists on behalf of the ministry for having engaged in a very, very productive manner. And I think I've gained more hearing you people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I will request our Joint Secretary, Kushi Kuldeep Narayan, to give a memento to each of the panelists here. And I know, sir, this session is very short for discussing all those issues, but it's a good beginning. And in fact, after 19 sessions, this was going to be the final session. Thank you so much. Now we'll continue in this session, in this hall, 2 more sessions, thematic sessions. Okay.
Just one announcement that considering that this hall is a bit smaller, our 4 p.m. session and tomorrow morning plenary session will be held in inaugural hall itself, so that we are more comfortable. That is one. And number 2, I can see a lot of enthusiasm and lot of interest in the issues being discussed. Let me be honest with you, having 1.5 hours to discuss such an deep topic is very difficult. And we have a complete day today and tomorrow also, where different subtopics of the affordable housing sectors are being discussed. Some of you are panelists in those sessions, and others we will be listening to all the experts who are here. So let's all of us participate in all the sessions, so that will actually complete our 360-degree point of view. Thank you all.